The meta within Smash Ultimate's competitive scene has undergone a very noticeable shift. The current meta predominantly emphasizes mid to long range and/or whiff punish oriented characters, with the top 4 being Steve, Rob, Snake, and Aegis, and further extending down the list we have Palutena, Cloud, Samus, and Game & Watch. Across the character roster, there's been more importance placed on fighters who can punish enemy aggression rather than fighters who can exert aggression themselves, but it wasn't always like that. Back in the early days of Smash Ultimate, the most popular used to be very confrontational and attack heavy. Or maybe not necessarily characters, but playstyles used to be much more aggressive, a greater focus on outplaying your opponent instead of outlasting them. The past couple of years have witnessed extensive growth within the sword fighter and trapper categories, with many players discarding their mains in favor of the likes of Steve, Kazuya, Aegis, Snake, what have you. One such archetype that's been affected pretty hard by the change in priority was Rushdown fighters, and even among the players who still champion a member of that class, there's a growing loss of faith in their main's abilities. So for today's video, I want to address the question, have Rushdown fighters fallen off, or are they still as good as they always were? Historically, the archetype has commanded a very strong following, especially in the West. North America in particular is famous for having a penchant for high-octane, high-intensity gameplay, as evident by several of its best and most popular contenders fielding characters known for their speed and aggression. Cola, Light, Riddles, Mars, Fatality, Leo, Tweak, Cosmos, Esam, Void, and so on. The reasons were obvious. Aggressive characters are very fun to play and equally fun to watch. According to many, the game's best period was 2019 and early 2020, at least from the perspective of a spectator. But it wasn't just for the sake of entertainment or personal preference. Rushdown fighters were in a really good spot relative to the competition for the better part of the game's earlier lifespan, and while they're still around today, those who play them have had to make a lot of adjustments to the way they see the game to account for the new dangers and risks that come with fighting through sheer aggression. As with any archetype, the definition of a rushdown fighter comes down to everyone's interpretation. Some may consider Joker to be a rushdown, while others consider him to be more of a bait and punisher or generalist, so let's begin there. To me, a rushdown fighter denotes anyone whose primary, keyword primary method of pressure entails relentless attack, someone who's quick to close in on you without giving you any room to counterattack or even react. This doesn't always mean they have to be fast in a conventional sense, although speed is without question conducive to this kind of playstyle. Rushdowns also come with some measure of risk to executing their game plan. While in the right conditions, their pressure feels almost indomitable, they have to expose themselves to the very real possibility of getting overwhelmed themselves, forcing the player to be highly aware of their inherent vulnerability and executing as close to perfect as humanly possible to avoid that outcome. Semantically, the term rushdown is used interchangeably with brawler, anyone who fights up close and personal. As such, it can be confusing on where to draw the line, but ambiguous designation basically sums up the experience of creating archetypes anyway. Arguably the epitome of a rushdown fighter is Fox, a character legendary for his mobility, attack speed, and ability to rack up huge amounts of damage through many of his moves. This is of course offset by how easy it is for him to explode from just a few lost neutral interactions himself. As proven by Light, however, the character is more than capable of tearing through even the best of the best, as his combination of aggressive attributes makes him feel virtually unbeatable at times. Like I said though, rushdown doesn't always have to come in the form of mobility. A case study being Terry. Physics-wise, Terry is pretty average. His airspeed leaves a lot to be desired, and while his ground movement is excellent for playing footsies thanks to his backward dash, he's not winning any awards in running speed. That isn't to say he can't get all up in your face, however. Terry has a wide arsenal of burst movement options in the form of Burn Knuckle, Crack Shoot, Power Dunk, and then later Buster Wolf that can surprise you courtesy of their far distance coverage and ridiculous power. Once he gets up close, he has some of the best close quarters combat in the game, owing to being an FGC character. All it takes is a jab or down tilt and you're either going to take a huge amount of percent or get destroyed outright. Spacing against him in the air is also of paramount importance, as he is deceptively fast and good coverage on his aerials. Overall though, Terry's game plan hinges on constant pressure up close, making him eligible to be part of this category. Last noteworthy example of a rushdown would be Roy, and to a lesser extent his Echo fighter Cromp. Despite carrying a sword, Roy is widely considered a rushdown fighter on account of the need to be as close to his opponent as possible to land sweet spots. This in tandem with his uncharacteristically fast frame data and notorious tendency to mash on your shield gives off a very strong impression that he belongs with the fisticuffers. To repeat, you can make an argument for a lot of characters being part of this category or not, but the point of the video isn't for designation, rather to discuss the challenges the archetype faces as a whole. To better highlight those challenges in question, we need to first take a look at why they were doing so well in the beginning. The two most noteworthy causes were the total rebalancing of the roster and new additions to the game. Among the 6 new fighters, Inkling, Ridley, the Belmonts, K-Rool, Isabelle, and Incineroar, Inkling was far and away the best one. They commanded a very good first impression, as you no doubt remember, attributed to their outstanding mobility, good frame data, and high damage output with Ink, not unlike the traits we see in Fox. In addition, a lot of once bad characters like Pichu, Roy, Wario, Pokemon Trainer, and Greninja returned with a vengeance, receiving substantial buffs to propel them all the way to the top of Ultimate's early tier list. Compounding this change was a nerf made to characters that performed very well in Smash 4, most notably to whiff punishers and mid-range fighters. Bayonetta, Diddy Kong, Rosalina, Cloud, Marth, Corrin, and Lucario were all slammed pretty hard with nerfs at the beginning of the game. Fighters who excelled at either punishing the few mistakes Rushdown fighters would make to great effect, or preventing them from ever getting within striking distance in the first place. Universal changes also worked in their favor, 3 of which being the faster physics given to the entire cast, diminished pressure of long-range attacks, and the adjustments made to universal defensive options. If you go into any character's wiki page and scroll down to the changes from Smash 4 tab, in the attributes section you'll see that everyone has faster movement, more ground speed, air speed, traction, and so on. Some got more than others, but across the board everyone is faster overall. Almost every projectile in the game deals noticeably less damage on shield than straightforward attacks. Even though, for instance, Samus's charge shot does well over 30 damage at full power, it only cuts a full shield by 40%. This gives her opponent a better time going in and getting up in her face as opposed to when a full charge shot did like 70% of a full shield. Speaking of shields, perfect shielding has been replaced with parry, where in that game you would fully nullify an opponent's attack by raising a shield on hit. In this game, you had to drop your shield on hit to achieve a parry, significantly increasing the risk of attempting such an action. With perfect shielding, even if you failed to correctly time when the attack would make contact, you would still block it since you raised your shield anyway, with the only consequence being the shield stun and damage you would normally take. On the other hand, mistiming a parry would cause you to sustain the attack in full force. Furthermore, the universal reduction to landing lag on aerials has made them much safer to use as approach options, to which they most certainly do. I still personally think that sword fighters benefited the most from this change, but seeing as how it now presents an entirely new way for Rushdown fighters to attack their opponent, it played a big role in their initial success. Fox's main approach tool being neutral air is -3 on shield. All of Roy's aerials are also very safe, Captain Falcon's too. The dynamic of shielding in general has been changed extensively. For one, the universal auto shield option, grab, was nerfed a lot, having much more end lag if missed, and with aerials being much safer on shield, landing aerial into spot dodge to avoid a grab afforded you an easy punish into whatever you wanted, and you could be rest assured they will make you regret leaving yourself wide open. Though up smash can now be used out of shield, not everyone has a fast enough up smash to actually use it out of shield. Finally, disadvantage options were severely hamstrung. The reinstatement of directional air dodges came at the expense of losing the ability to air dodge more than once in the air, a privilege many fighters depended on to mitigate enemy pressure, in addition to having significantly more end lag, presenting a mix-up opportunity where you could bait out an air dodge and then get a free punish whenever you want to. Rolling has also been nerfed, both in terms of startup and end lag, unless you forget the global change made to where continuous rolling will cause subsequent rolls to have less and less intangibility frames and more end lag with each one. Altogether, the changes made to individual characters, as well as universal systems, benefited Rushdown fighters tremendously by restricting access to defensive options, thereby indirectly buffing their already dangerous advantage states, and eliminating the competition best suited to handle the archetype. So for 2019, the first full year of Smash Ultimate and the early part of 2020, no archetype was better than them. Then, everything changed when the Wi-Fi era came about. 2020 oversaw marginal yet noticeable nerfs to several members of the Rushdown archetype such as ESS, Wario, Wolf, Joker, and Pokemon Trainer, worsening their effectiveness. Meanwhile, buffs were given to many underperforming members, including the aforementioned so-called counters. While they may not have been enough to objectively elevate them to top-tier status, they were enough to narrow the gap between the best and the worst. Heavyweights used to be the biggest victims of Rushdown fighters, but after extensive improvements to their moveset, matchups like Fox vs Incineroar are no longer turn your brain off an instant win like it used to be. And, of course, fighters passed too. 6 new fighters, 3 sword fighters, 1 zoner, 1 trapper, and a touch of death character. Trappers are also notoriously difficult to handle since the whole basis of their gameplay is for their opponent to get caught in their trap. But Rushdowns lack the option to play long or even mid-range. They have no choice but to directly play into their hands. Now, Rushdowns are typically decent against zoners, at least once they get within striking distance of their opponent, but Min Min is the exception. Her range is so absurd that it's impossible to get even close to her, let alone exert any kind of pressure. Lastly, Kazuya, whose close quarters combat is so overwhelmingly skewed in his favor that despite being a brawler himself, he counters his own archetype. It doesn't help that all of these characters are competitively viable if not meta. Just as the surrounding environment changed to suit their preferences at the beginning of the game, it was changed once more against their preferences towards the current point of the game. There's also one other factor at play, adaptation. After dominating the meta for so long, virtually every player has experienced fighting rushdowns and have made adjustments to deal with them. Some became more versed in the matchup, while others switched to characters who had a better time dealing with them. It's true that several rushdown fighters got nerfed, Thing is, the dynamic has shifted to where not only are players better prepared to face them, but the advent of punish-oriented fighters like Steve and Kazuya, in concert with the resurgence of anti-Rushdown fighters like Game & Watch, Diddy Kong, Cloud, etc., have made the competitive environment increasingly more hostile and unfavorable to them. The consequences of these events are clear as day. Previously high-performing top players like Mars, Cola, Eastam, Fatality, and Gluto have been struggling to maintain the same results they once garnered, while those who still managed to hold fast in the rankings like Riddles, Tweak, Cosmos, Louis Money, Ned, and Leo have basically discarded their original mains to adapt to the new meta. Riddles used to play Terry, now he's almost exclusively Kazuya. Tweak used to play Wolf, Wario, and PT, now he plays Diddy and Sephiroth. Cosmos used to play Inkling, now he plays Aegis. Louis Money used to play Fox, now plays Palu. Ned used to play PT, now plays Sephiroth. Famous of all, Leo used to play Joker, now plays Violet and Aegis. Really, the only exception to all of this is Light, who single-handedly keeps Fox alive by being so ridiculously cracked at the game that through sheer force of will, he just makes it work. But even he's not immune to changes in the meta. He had to undergo massive adaptations in his gameplay to continue to play Fox at that level. Suffice to say, Rushdown's had it rough for a while. When I take a look at the PGRU from fall 2019 and compared to alt rank 2022, it's almost night and day. It's certainly not a good playing field for them. Of course, I'm not implying that Rushdowns can't find success, they're still very strong. I think everyone still unanimously agrees that Roy, Fox, Wolf, Pikachu, and whatnot are extremely powerful characters, but you have to admit the meta has changed a lot. Perhaps not exactly in the characters themselves, but what competitors prioritize. A lot of people like to point fingers at Fighters Pass 2 for ruining the archetype, but in all honesty, the downfall of Rushdown fighters began well before that. It merely remained hidden under the surface until DLC forced it upwards. That being said, the archetype can more than make a comeback, in fact, I'm counting on it. The inherent strength of a Rushdown fighter is that they're theoretically the best characters in the game if they can continuously pressure their opponent while giving them no time or breathing room to respond. That has stayed the same. What did change is their opponents and the competitive landscape. Players have become better at preparing for and punishing careless aggression and punishing it harder, playing into the weakness of Rushdowns being their vulnerability to the same pressure they can dish out. But that doesn't mean you can't adapt to your opponent's adaptation, as demonstrated by Light, Kurama, Gluto, and Leo himself. Kurama just kinda came out of nowhere and started blowing everyone up after being virtually non-existent for 2020 and 2021, and he still plays the tried and true Mario. Gluto has made incredible adaptations to Wario's gameplay and has maintained himself as Europe's best player to this day. I think the future of Rushdowns comes down to how well his players temper that aggression, knowing when to slow down and play the long con and when to speed up. We're no longer in a meta where the faster or more mashy characters dictates the pace of the game, it's now very push and pull oriented. This does go against the natural flow of the archetype though, so I can understand why so many people are either switching mains or retiring from competition altogether. It doesn't feel good to have to slow down on a character who excels at playing fast, but such is the nature of competition. So to wrap things up, have Rushdown fighters fallen off? Yes. Does this mean they're no longer viable? Of course not. What worked before can work again, provided they account for the game's current priorities and adjust their playstyles accordingly. I'm trying my best to not make it sound like the solution is just get good, cause easier said than done, but the Smash community is known for being quite stubborn to change at times. Eventually it does though. Anyways, I think I'll end it off here. Let me know your thoughts on the archetype in the comments down below if you agree or disagree with my stance on it. Apart from that, if you enjoyed the video, it would be great if you left a like and subscribed. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other class videos if you haven't yet. But for now, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.